If you follow deep ocean racing, you'll know that we've been running a few features on it recently, and you'll also know that this is the season for round the world records, and in particular assaults on the Jules Verne trophy, which is for the fastest lap of the planet under sail. Aside from the course, there are no rules. The boats can be as big as you like, fully crewed, you just have to get round quickly. And this year, 2 new records were set. One by Thomas Coville's Sedebo that took 12 hours off the previous record and is now the fastest boat to circumnavigate the world. The other was a new reference time for an all-female non-stop circumnavigation, which was set by Alexia Barrier's team aboard the famous project. Dee Caffari was the co-skipper, and she's just back from the trip. So we thought it'd be a good idea to have a chat with her whilst the thoughts are fresh in her mind and before she's washed all that salt out of her system. Dee, well done. What a trip. The first thing I want to ask you, have you recovered?
I feel as if I'm fine, but I'm sure if I was to get back on a boat now, I'd notice the fatigue level.
Yeah.
I think it takes longer than you imagine to recover from something like that.
And is there a difference between sort of like the mental recovery and the physical recovery?
I think so, and I found this actually mentally more exhausting than physically exhausting. The physicality of it wasn't so much the grinding and the sail changes, that was relatively easy, but it's the actual just living in the conditions, like down below, the movement in a bunk, you're being shaken the whole time, so you just don't have any rest. And I think that's the physicality that you suffer from. It's like an induced stress level. But the emotional stress was quite full on because we just faced challenge after challenge, as you know.
Yeah, well, we'll come on to that in a minute. But the physical side, the physical challenge, I'm interested to hear you say that because an Imoca's a pretty rough ride as well, isn't it? A Volvo 65 is quite a rough ride as well.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So compared to the Volvo 65s, it was an absolute dream because for once we weren't sat in a wall of water, in a puddle of water, getting hosed the whole time. You were that much higher. So it was quite a dry ride, relatively speaking. But the down below and the intensity and the surging and the stopping in the waves, that was more like an IMOCA, foiling IMOCA, where the noise is incredible, the sensation's incredible. Just doing simple things like pouring hot water into your freeze dried is really difficult.
Mm. And on the Ocean Race Europe, and indeed the Volvo Ocean Races before, but certainly with the Imocas, they were talking about the deceleration as something that really worried people, and they're wearing helmets and armour all the time. Is it like that on a giant tri, or is it a little bit smoother?
It's much more forgiving, and I was surprised because I was thinking, we went down some mountains that I was like, are we coming out of this? But actually, because the bows are so much further in front of you, they come out the next wave and go again. And actually, it's more smooth ride and it's sustained and it just finds the next wave. And when you get it set up right, it feels really nice. But there are those moments where you're just like, whoa, where did that come from?
How long did it take to get used to that, though? Because, we'll come on to how many times you've been around the world in a minute, but your multi-hulls is not your thing, or wasn't before, was it?
Yeah, I think I'm converted, that's for sure. But none of us had sailed a multi-hull before. So yes, we had experience on the boat, but actually all of us were going around on a multi-hull for the first time. And that's across all female sailors. There just isn't that depth of multi-hull knowledge or experience because the opportunities haven't been there. So here we are. And I think it was apparent in our boat speed and how we sailed that it took us a while to learn how to sail the boat, to get comfortable with the speed, to be sustained speed and find the right settings. You sail a lot with an autopilot, and we were still learning the settings with the pilot for the boat in the different conditions. And I think just as we were getting good, that's when our first challenge happened as we entered the Southern Ocean. We were just starting to ramp up the miles each day, and then we got faced with a challenge. And it wasn't probably until the Pacific that our confidence came back. And you can see in the Pacific and the South Atlantic coming north, the mileage and the boat speed was equal to that of everybody that we're in competition with. So I feel like this lap was our practice lap, and now we know what we're doing, we can go again.
How because I remember when we spoke before, or shortly after you got taken into the team, and you were off on a Mod 70 doing your first transatlantic on that. And the idea of a Mod 70 across the Atlantic is because we know they capsize. How long does it take to feel comfortable about that if you're a confirmed monohull sailor that the boat's not going to be upside down?
Yeah, the intensity is so different, and that risk and reward is a real fine line. And probably the most comfortable position to be in is driving, because you know how it feels, you know that you're comfortable. Everyone on deck is kind of looking at you to say, are you comfortable? And we've got the rope in our hand if it's not comfortable. But everyone down below is oblivious. So, their well-being is really in your hands. And I think, the Mod 70 was on the edge all the time. And when we transferred onto the big boat with the maxi trimaran, it feels so much more comfortable.
Right.
It's kind of built for purpose. You're much higher up. That risk of living on the edge is much further. So I think we did the right thing. And Brian Thompson always said to us, you train on the mod, you'll find the big boat easy. And he was absolutely right. And now we step on the Mod 70 and it feels like a dinghy.
Yeah.
Like, it's so low to the water, it's so exposing, and you do bear the brunt of the elements, whereas we felt pretty safe on the big boat.
Now, look, before we get into the trip, which I do want to talk about in a bit more detail, I think we should get straight into a bit of your CV, because for the two people that don't know, that haven't been following you, because obviously the rest of the world's been following you for a long time, I just want to remind people, this is your 7th circumnavigation. That's quite a number, isn't it? Just looking down it, it started with, obviously you know this, but just to skip through it, 2004 Global Challenge, that was your first one. 2006 Westabout Solo, that was in Aviva, wasn't it? That was the Global Challenge boat going the wrong way around. The 2008-9 Vendée Globe, where you came 6th. 2010-11 Barcelona World Race, that's 3 non-stop laps of the planet at this stage. 2014 Volvo Ocean Race 65, Team SCA, and then 2017-18, that was Turn the Tide on Plastics on a Volvo 65. Fascinating stuff. I actually skipped over breaking a record around Britain and Ireland in 2009, but that's not around the world, so we're not interested in that at the moment.
Yeah, around the world or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. That's all I care about now. 7. What is it about going around the world that keeps you doing it again and again?
I genuinely love it. And I thought, oh, will this be like the 1 lap too far kind of thing? But I've been super lucky, 7 laps, but each one's been totally different, with a very different objective, a different role. And, I think back to that first lap where I was kind of green in leadership, and having that amateur paying crew for the experience.
This is on the Global Challenge.
Global Challenge, yeah. 12 identical boats. That was an emotional roller coaster. And it probably is what led me to going solo straight afterwards. But, you never know. But to then be, part of teams or leading teams or being all female or double, every aspect has been very different. So it's a very rich experience that I've had in my round the world laps. And I genuinely love that environment that we're in.
But you haven't, it strikes me that you hadn't ever planned it to be like that, have you? You haven't had a list of, right, the next one has to be different from the one before.
No, I think I've just been really lucky. And you could argue that actually if I stuck at something, I might get quite good at it. But, circumstances haven't allowed that to happen. You always dream of, the Vendée Globe is something so exceptional that you think, oh, I know I could do it better next time, and wouldn't that be great? But I came back in 2008, a financial crisis with no sponsorship, able to be attained in the UK. And then, I was lucky that other things have come up. So I consider myself fortunate.
Yeah, you've also had some challenges as far as running the boat. You talk about the Global Challenge, the first one you did, where you're responsible for a team and you were quite new to it. One of the things that struck me when I reminded myself of what you'd done was when you went round with Turn the Tide on Plastics. That was with a youth and female team, wasn't it? And I think that was quite hard at times, wasn't it? I think I remember talking to you and you were, how should we put it, a little bit anxious about it at times, I guess because of the responsibility.
Yeah, and actually, when you put it like that, I forget, because you just kind of think, oh yeah, we did it. But actually, it wasn't like I took an easy option. But then I don't think anyone else could have done that project. It was everything I've done before. Yes, they were young and inexperienced, and in the Volvo, everybody buys in experience. And I had 80% of my crew under 30 sailing around the world for the first time. I had a fully mixed crew that had never been done before. But if anyone was going to do it, the female skipper was going to do it. So I completely understood why I took it on. And I would say that all the things I've learned each lap, I've managed to implement into the next trip round. And I think Turn the Tide was definitely a culmination of all my experiences into one place. And actually now being Alexia's co-skipper for the famous project CIC was very much, how do I help her in this project? And, I put in all the things I'd learned.
Yes, it did strike me watching you going round and looking down the list of experience on board the boat, and it really struck me how, and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but how in some quarters, how little experience there was. I mean, people had never been around the world before. They hadn't sailed multi-hulls. None of you had sailed a multi-hull around the world before. I mean, that was really quite, and it just reminded me of that Turn the Tide on Plastics kind of situation. I just imagined that you must have taken a lot from that you then used in this particular
Absolutely.
trip.
I mean, how do you get multi-hull experience in the Southern Ocean? Well, you have to take a multi-hull to the Southern Ocean. How do you get multi-hull experience? Well, you've got to go sailing. And so it is that case of, you can't go and buy in the experience because there wasn't any in the female genre. So, how do you do it? Well, you just give people the opportunity and you try and implement everything you've learned. Out of 8 of us, only Alexia and I had been non-stop. Out of 8 of us, only 4 of us had been around the world before. But how nice is it that we can share the experience and create a legacy and give those younger sailors that platform to launch their careers from? And for me, part of it is seeing that team grow and seeing them come out the other end. And some of them are going to go on and be invaluable people in the crew.
And sometimes those kind of situations can actually work to your advantage as well, don't they? I mean, you can think of the other end of the scale where everybody's an absolute rock star and they've all done it and been there. And that doesn't mean that it's actually any easier sometimes, because then there's a conflict.
It's harder to manage, and you've got that whole democracy, and actually to be the leader of something like that is really hard unless everybody knows their role and everyone has complete trust and respect for each other. But given that we're all learning these beasts from the same place, it was like, okay, you've got the experience, and we all had roles. Ultimately it was Alexia's decision and responsibility. My job was to coordinate everybody and get the team to work together, and within that we gave people areas of ownership, and that way they get buy-in, that way they feel they're contributing, but there's definite direction. And when it got a bit messy, somebody had to make the decision. So Alexia and I would talk and we would make it happen.
Yeah, no, I can understand how that kind of sort of hierarchy would work. What was it like though, leaving? Because I mean, as we say, you've done it seven times around the world, and I'm sure leaving must be really quite emotionally quite difficult in whatever situation you're in. But this time,
so if I told you the week before, you would not actually imagine we were leaving for around the world. So that week, there was always a potential for us to go the weather window, and it had moved a couple of days. But I think there were still some people within the team doubting that we were going to go. That week, we left on the Saturday. Friday night, we finished packing the food into bags for it to go on the boat. Thursday night was Alexia's birthday. We spent until midnight packing the spares with the shore team into the different bags and making the shore list in French and English so that everybody could understand it. I mean, we were so tired from a really busy week of putting all the final things together to actually leave the dock and go. And then when we got it to be Saturday and we left and it was sunshine and it was a Saturday, I was like, oh my God, that's a gift. Like a sponsor would dream of that, and off we went. And it was hard work to go upwind to go. And then we left and it was quite difficult sea state. And Alexia made a really good call. She was like, we just have to manage this. We've got everything to lose right now and nothing to gain. So let's just manage expectations at the start. And that's probably what kept us in there.
I mean, there were certainly some punchy pictures from the start. We kept using them again and again because they look really good. But it's a tricky place to start from, isn't it? I mean, you're thrown
hard. And
straight into
if you get the good departure window, you're inevitably from Brest to get to the start line is upwind through the narrow channel. And Alexia she's so impatient when she's not calling the ley lines. And of course, I'm the one calling the ley lines. And she's like, we need to tack. I was like, not yet. We were so close to the rocks to start. I was like, oh, we do not need this stress. The sea state was unbelievable. And of course, little did I know that 57 days later, we were going to have a similar sea state on the way back in.
It was good practice then, wasn't it? So the first leg down, I say the first leg, but the first major stage down south, generally went pretty good, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite stress-free. We got more and more comfortable. And We had a difficult doldrums. It didn't really leave us. There wasn't, in my head, it was like we should have 2 days of sunshine and then be through. And it was just cloudy for days. And it was weird. It kind of went on and on. And then we finally got to Brazil and Brian Thompson had described it as, this is your moment where you get your rest because it's the easy miles. Super flat water, the boat goes in a straight line. And we were like, oh, it's just as he said. And then we waited and we got that little depression that came off of Brazil and we got to cut the corner. And we were like, oh, apparently this is where we go really fast. And we were just at that stage where we were confident to start the mileage building up. And every time it was like, oh, we should do a sail change. Just like, no, we don't want to slow down. This is really good. And then it all went wrong.
Yes. Tell us a bit about that, because when you say it all went wrong, this was with the halyard lock. Yeah.
This was our first major challenge, and we went to put a reef in. And at first, the lock system, and it's just a car that sits underneath the main car at the head of the sail, and it wouldn't come off the lock. So eventually we get it off the lock, we get it off, and then we trip it and it wouldn't go on the lock at the reef. So then we're like, well, we can't get it off, we can't get it on, like, what are we going to do? Well, let's take the main down, let's have a look, because we're about to go in the Southern Ocean. So everything for me is like we've just spent a day prepping for the Southern Ocean. It's coming fast. And we've done all the checks, and it's like, oh, we've got a bit of a problem. And we took the car off, and it's really simple. It's like a spring with a little fork, piece of metal and a plate. And it had been changed to titanium. Really good, but it quite soft. And there was just a little bit of movement, and the tolerance is really fine. So was that the issue? We don't know. How do you get inside this lock while it's in place? We go up the inside of the rig because that's the easiest place to go, but you can't see anything. You go up the outside, you can't see the mechanism, and we're pulling trip lines and everything's working. And it's like, right, do you make a decision with something that's quite critical? Not 100%. Do you make the decision to go in the Southern Ocean? And I said to, so Alexia and I had a long conversation. This is a seamanship decision now. Do you choose to go in, not being 100%? Do we cut our losses, turn around, go get it fixed and start again? Do we stop in Cape Town? In which case, what are we doing? Why are we going to Cape Town? And it's like the pressure. You could see the pressure. We had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. Alexia lost a lot of sleep over that. And I was like, I support you in whatever you're doing. But this process took about 3 days, and we're sat on 2 reefs, and shall we, shan't we? And we're kind of still sailing, but not really sailing properly. So like, we're not sailing at full potential. We're not sure if we're keeping going. We're not sure if we're about to do a U-turn. And the pressure and the tension on board was awful. And actually, Christian Dumas sent a really lovely message, 10 reasons why you shouldn't stop now. And actually, it was really nice to just get an outside perspective. Yeah. And actually, it was much bigger than the sporting challenge. Yes, you wanted the record. Okay, you're not going to get that now. But actually, what you will achieve is female sailing a multi-hull around the world. You will get Southern Ocean experience. You're going to learn so much that this is worth doing. And so Alexa was like, what do you think? And I said, well, that basically tells me you want to go. I said, so if we're going, we're going. She said, well, we could always, there's always Australia and New Zealand. I was like, that's not going to help anyone. If we're going all the way and we're going to make it. I said, I will make sure we make it. That was a bold call at the Cape of Good Hope. And so we made the decision, and everyone had to actually realign their objectives, and for, I really struggled at first because I was frustrated. We just lost 3 days, which, it was like, well, what were we doing? So it's really frustrating. Like, so why are we achieving it? And so I kind of did a bit of counting of days. I was like, right, 500 miles a day, which is easy to do. I said, we can be back, and the objective now is to be sub 50 days. We're going to be dancing on tables for my birthday. And I was like, okay. And everyone kind of like, oh, that gives us something to aim for. Because before it was just like, oh, well, what do we do now? And I think, when you see the Olympians who are focused by performance, Tamara especially, she was like, well, if I'm not 100%, what am I doing? I don't understand. And it took a while to process. And then we started sailing properly again. So we sailed with what we had. And then the deal was, if we needed to put a reef in or shake a reef out, everyone was on deck and we would deal with it. And we didn't quite know what that meant, but we would deal with it. And so it took, and because you have that setback, you have a little bit of confidence lost in the equipment. And you're suddenly like, oh. And then you like, do we go for the reef a bit early just in case, or do we just push it as far as we can and then really struggle? So there was that element where the Indian Ocean was a bit difficult for us. We were quite far north just because of the weather systems we had. And, it took us a while to find our rhythm. And then, then it started to settle in and it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's amazing. I can't imagine even setting out on a fast net and discovering that you can't reef the main, or you're not confident about being able to reef it. Your situation down there is just, but the way you describe it, I can imagine how you have to. In some ways, you have no. Well, you do have a choice, but the choices are so stark, they're so different.
Yeah, and it's extreme. It's a big load of sail area that you're getting rid of. Yes, you're downwind, but at 26, 27, 28 knots, you want to put a reef in, and then actually if you do anything wrong, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Do you think that was the hardest decision you had to make in the whole trip? Do you think?
I think so, because it was a big call to make, given the experience level we had. But actually, we learnt so much about sailing a boat and ourselves and everything in the process. But it was a big call. It was a big call for Alexia to make, of like, no, we're going in there when the boat's not 100%. Many people wouldn't have done that.
No, it's amazing. It really stood out for me watching it, thinking that is one hell of a big call. So going around the bottom of the world, Point Nemo, I mean, that's quite a place to go to, I would imagine.
It actually, that week was really cool. We did Bex's birthday, we did Cape Lewin, we did Christmas, we did New Year, we did South of New Zealand, and then we did Point Nemo. It was like every few days there was something to celebrate, and it was really cool. We'd had a big net as a Christmas present on the starboard foil, which literally was 30 knots to zero. Like everybody hit the wall, and I ran up on deck straight away, and it was massive. And initially the foil wouldn't come up. We got it off, we backed down, and it wouldn't come up, and we were like, oh, let's just give it time. And over time it did come up, and it was like, okay, all good, bit of damage, but it's not going to stop us. Bit of vibration, but that's fine. And we keep going, and then we get to Point Nemo. And Point Nemo for Tamara, Annemiek, Stacey and myself, who did the 2017-18 Volvo Ocean race, that was pretty much the location where we lost John Fisher. Right. And Annemiek was on board Scallywag. So none of us have been back since then. So it was quite an emotional time of remembering, and I was like looking out for Annemiek, just like, how's she doing? She was a bit emotional, but she did really well. And we had a little tot of whiskey to toast. And then, of course, you look at the location, and we're right where Royal Sun Alliance with Tracy Edwards' team lost their rig, like the furthest a female team had got before. And then we have a big depression at the same time, and it's just like, oh my gosh, and everyone's like, all the superstitions come out. And so it was a bit of a tense time, but actually once we got through that, I was like, okay, Cape Horn, here we come. Yeah.
And Cape Horn turned out okay, didn't it? It wasn't too bad going around there.
Cape Horn was amazing, to the point where Bex, who took on the drone flying, had flown the drone once before we left. She did all the drone flying, and we still got it on board when we got back. So she did brilliantly. She flew it at Cape Horn. I was like, everyone was excited about the photos, and I was like, I just want to drive. I want to drive this boat at 30 knots past Cape Horn. And I did, and I was just like, yes, what a way to go. We were close enough to see it. The sea state was really cool. Yeah, everything was just glamour. I mean, if you're going to have a good rounding, that was a perfect one. And then our exit from the South Atlantic was dream. For 3 days, we were 30 knots on one tack, on a port tack. But we didn't really think it was that foil that was in the water that was struggling.
Yeah, I noticed the damage on the foil. When did that happen? Was that when you hit the net? Or?
So hitting the net, obviously, we had a bit of damage, but it was superficial, so we thought. But we did 3 days, like, trucking up the South Atlantic. And it was only when we jibed and we went to bring the board up, we struggled to get it up. And the lifting post moved. And basically, it looked like we'd hit something. We hadn't noticed it, because what had happened is the tip of the foil had come clean off, but we didn't notice it. And so the lifting post had gone into the board. The board had obviously been moved, and that was damaged. And when we got it up, the whole of the tip was missing. And I was like, oh, well, we lost that then. And we didn't know. So I'm thinking that the netting actually caused more damage than we thought. And then obviously being on it for so long at such a speed, if we'd hit something, it would have taken it off straight away. And then when we were on it after that, it was probably like 10 to 15% loss in performance and horrible vibration.
Yeah. I mean, not that I've ever done it, but I can imagine from having watched so many round the world races and trips that when you get to Cape Horn, because that is the target and you're out of the south, then you turn north and now you're on your way home, you're heading home. But although you are, it's quite often where a lot of the stress comes in, isn't it? That leg coming home.
So I was really good at that point. I said to them, it's 7,500 miles to the finish. We point at home. Psychologically, this is huge. You're out the Southern Ocean, but the South Atlantic is sometimes the hardest bit to do. And I was really adamant about that, and I said it a lot. And then we had 3 days of glamour sailing, making our way up, and I was like, cool. And even I got sucked into getting excited south of the equator, where I was like, the routing was all showing, oh, we're going to be in, we could make the 50 days, we're going to be in for my birthday. And I fell for it. And I kept saying the last miles are the hardest. And then we got nailed in the North Atlantic.
Yeah, you did. Tell us about that, because you ended up going quite a long way off.
Yeah, so we ended up, we went through the doldrums and the equator at like 35 west. And then we made our way over, and we were going round the top of the high pressure. The Azores High was super established. But what was also happening was the line up of winter storms into the Bay of Biscay. And they were getting worse and worse. And it was interesting because Sodebo had a shocking South Atlantic. And then they were making ground, and it was like, okay, so we're converging. So they're now going the other side of the high pressure. And so they're doing that maneuver, but they've got a harder decision than us with these storms. And what was really apparent is sea state is everything for these boats. And we had opted always with the sea state to not really see more than 6.5 meters if we could help it. So all Southern Ocean, we'd add up to 50 knots, and that was fine. But the sea state was never much greater than about 6.5 meters, and it was really nice.
I was going to say, pretty long wavelength as well, isn't it?
In the south, it's nice, and the boat goes and she just keeps going. And here we were, and the forecast was for 50 gusting 60 with 8 to 10 meter waves. It was just like, no, we really don't want that. And we were like, could we do it? Could we not do it? And there was always the discussion, and we probably didn't voice it with the rest of the crew too early. But Alexa was like, we might have to wait and let it go and then come up. But what was happening is they were lining up one after the other. So the gap to get in between a low pressure was tight.
It definitely looked like that, didn't it? Because there was so many other systems. That must have been pretty nerve-wracking as well.
Well, I think it's frustrating because what happens is as you get closer, and this is probably the first round the world where I've been so connected. And I laugh talking about the Vendée Globe where everyone goes around the world on WhatsApp, but actually you're super connected. So we've got an international crew with people coming from all over the world to see the boat finish, and the arrival date keeps moving, and potentially we're going to have to move it again. But you get to the point where you're just like, I just want to be in. We said we'd be in then, let's just get in. But actually the risk of potentially not finishing at all is massive. And you forget, because you've just done the Southern Ocean and you think you've nailed the bad bit. But you forget, because we're so fast now, we go around the world and we arrive midwinter into the Northern Hemisphere in the Bay of Biscay, which is notorious, that the storms coming in from the Atlantic, the continental shelf, just everything works against you. And you underestimate just how hard those last miles are. That last 1,000 miles was the hardest of the whole trip.
Really? Yeah. I haven't made a list of the number of times that it's gone pear-shaped for people, but it would make quite a long list, wouldn't it, if you take into account the Vendée Globe, Jules Verne attempts, all those kind of things.
Yeah, and the boat's tired, the people are tired, the gear's fatigued. I mean, we saw that with our mainsail. We thought we were managing it, and it ripped below the second reef. Okay, we went to 2 reefs, and then the thing just ripped again. It was like, okay, everything is fatigued. We have to nurse this boat to get to the finish line. And the important thing for us was to finish. So, you know, the 50 days went, my birthday went, and it was like, okay, we're just going to get to the finish somehow. And I think for, you know, the days became irrelevant, and it was, how do we do this? And we opted then to slow down at the Azores, but then the mainsail ripping kind of slowed us down ourselves. So we just went knowing then that we only had the head car plugged in, and a J3 when we were brave enough, or a J2 when we got excited.
Which, as it turns out, was probably all you needed at times.
Amazing. So that 23rd was delivering some horrible winds. So we had 40 to 50 knots. That was fine. But the sea state was pretty miserable for about 12 hours. It was easily 8 to 10 meters. It was the biggest, messiest sea we'd had. And the waves, the difference was the waves were breaking. And it was just like, but it was downwind. And we were on just the wing mast itself. And we had no head sail for the majority of that, and we were doing 15 to 18 knots. I was just like, I wonder what sail plan we would have had if we'd had the main up. Then the 24th was lovely, so we went J3 and then we went J2, and we were like making great speed, and everyone was getting super excited again. And then they said, oh, you know, the 25th is going to, you know, you're going to have a difficult sea state for about 6 hours. And that was by far the worst. And I think because we were inside the continental shelf then, we were between Finisterre and Brest. And it was horrendous. That was the only time we had 2 really big waves, and that was the only time I questioned whether we were going to make the finish line.
Really? Wow.
There was one wave in particular I didn't know if we were coming back from.
Wow.
And I was just like, not now, not 24 hours out, please no.
As in pitch polling? As in, yeah.
Well, the boat went, and I was like, everything down below fell, including the people. Checked on deck, we still had 2 people outside. I was like, are you guys good? They were like, yeah. And then I went and dealt with the debris of people and injuries and stuff like that. And I was like, 24 hours out, you just don't need it.
No.
And I was like, okay, right, everybody just calm down. We just need to get to the finish line. We're going to get there tomorrow, and it's going to be fine. This is your last night watch. And actually then the waves stopped breaking, and you were like, okay, it's getting easier. Okay, let's put the bigger sail out. Let's get to this finish and get it done. And then, of course, in the back of my mind, Alexia and I are both, so when we finish, we then have to go upwind in 35 knots to get to the, because you cross the line, and then we were going to Brest. It's 30 miles, and it's in that difficult sea state, and it was 30 to 35 knots. And I was like, yeah, it's fine in one direction, but we still got to get round there. And it's torrential rain, and by then it seemed normal to us. We were like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. No, I did wonder what that must feel like, finishing on a lee shore in those kind of conditions. By the way, how did you lose the... So you lost the protector on the starboard side, wasn't it? The screens by the wheel.
Oh, wave action. And that literally, I was commenting on how dry the boat was, and it felt quite good. That was the last literally 1,000 miles that some of the waves that came breaking on us just wiped them and us out. Yeah. Wow. We had 2 life jackets inflate, and the screens go on us.
Meanwhile, the guys on Sodebo were down below, wondering
inside
whether
in their slippers,
change their socks or not. Did you find that frustrating?
It was funny. It was just like, oh my God, look at that. Because we were following them, you know, and following the progress and watching the videos. And it was just so funny. We were like, they're in the same place we are, right? You know, it doesn't look like it. Can't be as bad where they are. But it's different of indoor yachting. And it's interesting when you see the 2 boats side by side, the difference. And that's 19 years of evolution. You know, our boat is 20 years old. This boat's 3 years old with, you know, massive advances in technology. I mean, it's very cool.
So then you crossed the line. How did that feel?
Oh my God, amazing. And the funny thing, we had an army plane come out first and do a little flyby. So everyone got really excited. You know, you couldn't see anybody, but everyone was still excited. And I think it was that proximity to land. We hadn't seen anyone or anything. The only land we saw was the Cape Verdes on the way south, Cape Horn, and then we saw the Azores. And that was all we saw the whole way round. And so the plane was exciting. And then we had a message saying, oh, the helicopter can see you. And we were 7 miles out. And I was like, and there's the lighthouse. And everyone was like, oh. And it was super cool. So I was like, right, just keep going and it's good. And when we saw the helicopter, it was just lovely. Familiar faces. And I think the excitement, I was like, we haven't finished yet. But everyone was like, no, there's no way we're not making that line now. So yeah, and it was genuine joy. And I think because it had been so hard, and there was, you know, a certain level of frustration on numerous times, it was, I think for me, it was relief. I think for Alexia, it was like, thank God for that. and, you know, for the girls, there was 4 of them for the first time sailing around the world, and for the others doing it for the first time non-stop. And it is very different, a non-stop lap compared to a lap where you stop.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also one of the other things is that when you look at the number of people that have done a lap of the planet on a multi-hull on their first attempt, it's not many.
Yeah, and that was super interesting. When we rounded Cape Horn, we learned that 3 females had rounded Cape Horn on a multi-hull before, and we made that number 11, which, when you put statistics like that and people say, oh, why do you need to do a female project? I was like, well, it speaks for itself. And then when you put the statistics of Jules Verne, as you say, now there's been 32 attempts and only 16 have made it round, 10 records and 6 without a record. But first time is really unusual.
It is.
And if you think about our preparation, when I was saying we just put the spares together 2 days before, the food together the day before, we'd probably sailed, 10 days on that boat before we left. And there's no surprise that we learned as much as we did. But there's also, I think, maybe people underestimated the tenacity of myself and Alexia of like, well, we are going to do this.
I must admit, I hadn't, until you did the piece when you were down the centrepiece back, sort of going through the stats of how many people had attempted it and how many had finished, it hadn't really struck me, I have to admit, that it was actually that stark. I mean, it's unbelievable that it's just been so few. The other thing it said to me, watching you go round, was how remarkable Joyon's record was in 2017 in that boat, that it's taken this long with such huge leaps in technology for the record to be broken. And then you could argue only, in inverted commas, by 12 hours.
Yeah, and I think even if you take into account the storm and stuff, it's still, it was an incredibly tough record to beat. And, yes, boats have moved forwards, and the idea now is that actually you don't have to leave on the perfect weather window because you can adjust and adapt. Now the boats are fast enough to do that. But Tomo and his crew had to push the limits a little bit. Like, they went and played in the ice. They went further south than the ice limit that we were working to suggested. And he'd made some bold calls, and they had some real setbacks, some of the weather systems like the South Atlantic coming north and stuff like that. So, it wasn't easy. He had to take some risks to get the reward.
What would you say, or have you had time to reflect on what you've learned out of this trip that you hadn't expected to learn from it before you went?
I think, and it's interesting, it's not the extremes that you're after. It's the consistent average that you need. And, Brian had said it to us, and you kind of go, yeah, as you're learning everything he's trying to tell you. But it's so true. And it's about getting the right conditions to allow the boat to sail. As soon as you're in conditions that are extreme, it's too hard. You're having to throttle back, you're having to just survive rather than sail. And you don't want to push, because then that's when you're risk. So that finding that right road through is a really difficult job to do, and you actually all have to be on the same page and understand what the boat can do. The weather team were phenomenal in working with us and getting that right call, and then adjusting all the time, as different setbacks. They were like, okay, we're guessing your polar with no mainsail is going to be this, and so it was getting even harder. But and I think we did a really good job. And I think what really helped is Clement Sertel was on board EDEC with Francis Joyon for the record, and he was our technical manager. Correct. So he knew the boat, he knew the spares, and he was like, oh no, you're fine, just keep pushing. The confidence he gave us was excellent. So that really helped fast track us. But it's getting comfortable at speed and getting comfortable with the settings. The pilot is critical. It drives a much better line than most of us most of the time, unless we can see the waves and we can play. So getting those settings right is really critical, and we probably didn't have enough time to be confident in that. We had to learn that along the way.
And this is, as we said, this is an old boat compared to the modern technology. And interesting, you talking about being in the right place and you don't need extremes. I guess that's the whole thing about the modern foiling boats, isn't it? Is that they can get to the weather that they need to be, and quite often it's flat water that they're after more than anything else.
Sea state all the time, absolutely critical. Even for us, when we're non-foiling, it made a massive difference of how you sail the boat. Because as soon as you're launching off waves or bearing into waves, it's too difficult. And now when they're foiling, they take off easier. But the flatter the sea, the easier it is. Less stress for everything, the gear and the people.
without even asking you, I'm getting the impression that it's whetted your appetite for another go.
I can't lie. And I think what would be absolutely sacrilege is if we did all this learning and then we didn't use it. You can't get this experience, learn all the things and not put it into practice. It would just be so sad. So I really hope there's some momentum and some opportunity because, even without trying, I could find 7 days just through the mainsail, the lock and the foil.
Are you talking about doing it on the same boat or on a modern foiler?
No, I think if we're honest, if you're going to go again, you want to step up another chapter. I don't want to go round on what we've just done. We want to go round and we've had the practice lap. Now we need to go and do it for real.
I thought you were going to say that.
8's a nicer round number, isn't it?
Or 10's even better, but What was the most memorable point of the whole trip, do you think?
I think we had 2 objectives. One was to cross the start line and one was to cross the finish line. And I think achieving those was excellent. Then we were going to worry about how we did. And then for me to see the development of the team and actually the cohesion of the team. Alexia did a really good job of leading a team, as you say, an international from lots of fields of sailing come together. And to see them unite, but to see the girls go around the world for the first time, round Cape Horn, do a non-stop lap. I mean, it was huge and genuine joy and excitement at what they'd achieved. I was like, Turn the Tide on Plastic, I said I was like a proud mum and I still, you still keep in touch with all those people. This is right up there with, I was super proud of Alexia making this happen. She was tenacious beyond belief to put this project together and see it through. Numerous stop-starts along the way. And I'm really pleased I was by her side to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, she's extraordinary. I mean, I think she's not particularly... I'm sure she's extremely well known in France, but she's not that well known outside France, is she? Well, she probably is now, but she certainly wasn't back then.
And I think because she's a Mediterranean-based sailor, there's definitely, a kind of the Med-based and the Lorient-based group. And she's just quietly got on with it. She did her Vendée Globe and had a dream and, has quietly gone with it. A lot of people doubted it would happen. And she's really stuck to her guns. And she's quite phenomenal. Be wary of things that come in small packages is what I'd say from that.
And do you think it's fired her up for another go at it?
Absolutely. I think she's seen what's possible and she knows how much better it could be with the right time, the right funding, everything coming together. And she really delivers for partners. I've really enjoyed working with her, so I hope I get the chance to do that again.
Yeah. Now, this is a very cliched question, of course, but what do you think what has this done for women's sailing? Because there'll be some people that say, well, how does that move it on? Because in offshore sailing in particular, the Vendée Globe and these kind of events, they've been mixed crews for quite some time. Is there still a need for an all-female team? So what do you think it's done and what does it do for it in the future?
Yeah, I think if you think back to the ocean race, for example, when Maiden did it all that time ago, then there was nothing. And then Team SCA did it, and then we started a bit of a movement, and then we ended up with incentivized rule changes to allow women in. And now the ocean race, Atlantic this year will be 50-50. That's huge progression. And it didn't happen naturally. It's had to be forced a little bit. The Vendée Globe, we've got some amazing female sailors in it. That's fine. We've had peaks and troughs with the numbers in years. But multi-hulls, there's just never... We don't see women doing it. I think Elodie and Claire Lebert were a phenomenon doing the Transat Cafe Law and finishing. I think it was the first time for multiple years that we've had females doing that. So I think it's a little bit like the ocean race was and everything else. It just needed something to push the narrative to create the change. And it takes time, we know it does. And people have to have confidence with who they sail with. But hopefully now we've inspired the next generation to see it's possible and dream of doing it and therefore get to do it, grow the experience pool, and hopefully the guys will provide the opportunities and the places to allow a mixed crew.
Would you want to, if you were doing it again, would you want to do it as an all-female crew? Or are you open-minded as to whether it's all-female or mixed? Or?
I think completely open-minded. I mean, the best sailing for me is mixed. I think you get the best out of both sides then. I think we've proved the point with the female team. But if it's a female team that has the opportunity to go, then I want it.
Looking more broadly at the future of these kind of round the world trips, it seems like we're in an amazing position in sailing right now with performance. I mean, your Jules Verne alongside Sodebo just showed it up. One boat on foils, one boat that held the record before, not on foils. Both extraordinary boats, but it couldn't be clearer that things have changed. And we know that there are other boats out there that are foiling boats as well. And now the next generation with Gitana 18, what have we got? Ferrari, the monohull foiler. What do you think when you look at those boats? Do you think that we're going to see records tumble? How do you see the future with that kind of technology?
I think it's totally transforming sailing. I think we only have to look at the transatlantic that's just happened. Because as they were coming across, we were coming up and we were like, oh, where do we fit in? And Raven was so fast, it was off, new record. But it's interesting because you see this technology at the America's Cup level at Sail GP, and now we're starting to see it in super yachts, and we're seeing it now with maxi trimarans and the old teams. They can literally do anything. Gitana 18 is like a whole new world. So complex that everything is controlled by trim tabs and hydraulics. As it gets really cool and new age, it's also really technical. And then you get you have to have a lot of redundancy in to make sure that it's going to make it around the world. But that's what they have time to work up and make sure of. But I think it's transforming sailing.
I mean, Gitana, one of the other things that seems to come across, and again, Sodebo was a good example of that. Sodebo's been in the water for quite some time, and yet she's only really just finding a stride. They had all kinds of gear failures in the early days. And it does seem it's very easy to underestimate how long it takes to work these boats up, doesn't it?
So yeah, I mean, Thomas Coville had his boat for 3 years, and it was development. Every time he sailed it, there was something, and it was where he found there was a weakness or something that he couldn't control, or it wasn't working for the sea state that they're in. And it'd be really interesting now with Gitana being so complex. Yes, it's meant to take off earlier, and yes, it's meant to fly in a bigger sea state, but actually the theory and the practicality is often very different. And I think when it first starts sailing, it'd be interesting to see how quickly they can get it up to pace.
Yeah, they certainly, at their, well, not the launch, but when they announced the boat, they were quite clear. Charles Cordrillo and several of the others were saying, it's going to take us a while to get this boat up to speed. Don't expect miracles just yet. They're sort of playing it right down.
Well, I think it's very quick. You put something as radical as that out there, and then they have one bad race or one bad sailing session, and then everybody will write it off. So I think it's, they've seen Thomas Coville take 3 years to manage his boat. So the boat concept is one aspect, but actually you've got to have the funds to do multiple years before you can actually get any performance.
Heaven knows how complex it's going to be for the Ferrari boat, a monohull on foils. I mean, that is just nuts.
Yes, but I think when you look at Giovanni, he's probably the right person to do it. Yeah, he'll put the right people around him, and he'll be like, yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. But it'll be fascinating to see. And I think, seeing Raven at the super yacht end of that kind of performance is interesting, because I think Ferrari will be the race boat end of the performance. I don't think it'll have any of the comfort that Raven has.
No. It was interesting listening to the comments of some of the crew on Raven at the end of that transatlantic race, particularly those that sailed Comanche. And they were saying that one of the things that really struck them was that when the thing was fully lit up and doing 30 odd knots, it's got 3 or 4 degrees heel, whereas Comanche had like 25 degrees and everything's flying around all over the place. And it just made me think how you think, crikey, that's really quite some change. You can't help thinking that maybe that is the kind of development that's going to help a much broader range of boats. And you almost echoed the same kind of thing at the beginning when we were talking, where you were saying on a big multi-hull, it's actually things are a lot more stable, aren't they?
Yes, and actually flat is fast. And you have to get rid of your mindset of being a monohull sailor, where, especially if you come from any Volvo 65 sailing, where extreme heel was the only way forward. If you weren't mountaineering, you're on the wrong sail plan. And you just don't need that. Flat is fast, and if you're heeling, it's like you got it wrong. And it's interesting the way their trim tabs work to reduce the heel, but the boat just actually wants to keep accelerating. So actually managing that is, and it is interesting. Brian Thompson said to us, I keep referring to him, he's like the guru, isn't he? He knows anything he hasn't done. But he said, like, you do not need to go at 40 knots. And at different times, all of us drove at 40 plus. And we were like, we do not need to be going this fast. But it's quite cool, that kind of eyes wide open. We've all driven there, but
So
actually,
you're hitting those kind of speeds.
yeah, but we weren't sustaining it. Whereas Jatana's plan is to be sustaining just over 40 knots.
Yeah, which is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's all great until it goes wrong.
Well, it is. Was it? How hard was it to make that transition into this completely new multi-hull world and different way of thinking?
I think with the first year when we were Mod 70 sailing, it was like I was learning to sail again. But it made it so exciting because it's so cool to learn new things in the sport that you love. And then, the faster you go, the more intense it is and the more on the edge it is. And actually, you just need everyone on the same page. But it's amazing how quickly you adapt. Suddenly, if you're not doing 30 knots, you're hunting for speed. And that's how we were. We were like, oh, it feels a bit pedestrian. We're only at 26 knots. It's like, okay, we need to find 30 knots. And a lot of the time, Alexia would write the weather forecast of like, this is what objective, course, true wind angle, no slower than. And it was like, okay, cool. That gives us license to go and find the speed, which was really good.
Well, it's an amazing trip. Thank you so much for that. It's great to see you. Well done. And it's a shame, actually, you haven't still got that Sunfast 3300, because every time we have a chat, you always inspire me to, maybe I could go and do a bit two-handed sailing with Dee. She could teach me
Well,
we
could, I'd be wanting to go really fast in it now.
Good. Well, fast is good, apparently, you tell me.
Flat is fast as well.
Oh, flat is fast, yeah. Brilliant. But once again, well done. Thanks so much, Dee.
Thanks.